As we launch into the journalistic essay in W203, I just want to make a few comments on J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy and some points on how he raises particular tensions and sets up context within his work, some kinds of things that you might want to try to do within your own journalistic essay here. First, two basic contexts get set up early on in his work. The first is geography, that is, how is Vance's story a part of the Rust Belt? That is, how is Vance's story kind of reflective of cities on the decline in the Mid-South and American North? How have his people been impacted by industrial migrations to northern cities? Also, an important geography for Vance is Appalachia and the rural poverty there in eastern Kentucky. He speaks of the town of Jackson, Kentucky, particularly early in the work, and how his people are from there and how the place itself continues to define him. And that place that they moved to, Middletown, Ohio, becomes important too, a place that he calls Middle-tucky because of the prevalence of Appalachians who are present within Middletown in their migrations. Also, identity is an important context for Vance. He is of Scotch-Irish descent. Work, in terms of identity, is defined by the folks who are day laborers or come out of the coal mines and then head north to work in the steel mills of Middletown. And then that identity of who or what is a hillbilly that Vance plays on. He kind of takes on that role of hillbilly and kind of redefines it in a sense within the work itself. In terms of points of tension, these are the kinds of conflicts that are present within Vance and within his world and are worth exploring, perhaps in your own essay as you think about your own story or the story of the person you're describing in the journalistic essay. The first is the tension of ideology. Right? He says in page 4 from the very beginning that we're a pessimistic bunch, defining himself within a political map of growing conservatism in the larger United States in the later part of the 20th, early 21st century. Ideologies are important, are traits such as honor and devotion to family and what he calls a bizarre sexism that continues to manifest itself within the culture from which he arises. Manual labor within that culture is seen as honorable work. And so he sets up the distinction on pages 57, 58, worth looking at in your text, between who does hard work versus who simply mooches along on the government. And Vance sees that as an important determiner in what defines his own kind of culture that he arises from. One I would also point to is that sense of a narrative of progress there. Does Vance feel that his family and his people are progressing within the larger American story? How does the person you're describing perhaps make points of contact to other American larger stories such as progress? Vance also thinks in terms of tension within whether his own culture is a regional subculture, right? A subculture in which there is no greater disloyalty than class betrayal, right? So you stay close to your own within Vance's world. And yet also you have a Jackson there that's full of contradictions. As he says at the bottom of page 20 onto 21, the truth is hard, and the hardest truths for Hill people are the ones they must tell about themselves. Jackson is undoubtedly full of the nicest people in the world. It is also full of drug addicts and at least one man who can find the time to make 8 children but can't find the time to support them. It is unquestionably beautiful, but its beauty is obscured by the environmental waste and loose trash that scatters the countryside. Its people are hardworking, except, of course, for the many food stamp recipients who show little interest in honest work. Jackson, like the Blanton men, is full of contradictions. And it's those contradictions that Vance is going to explore within his work, who or what defines the quote-unquote hillbilly, and how are those contradictions important to understanding the culture that surrounds him. He points to their migration north and in the end wonders if they are truly assimilated, right? Whether they have left the South and whether they have truly kind of become a part of the northern landscape. A couple other tensions that are present in Vance's story. One is that lack of agency that he feels, that his own destiny or his own future, the future of his generation, is not part of their control. Whether or not they can define themselves economically, whether there is a sense of progress in his generation. He points to the new economic realities of the Rust Belt and a globalized or post-globalized world where jobs have departed the region and that a sense of underemployment might be a new reality for his generation. And one final tension I would point to within the work is that one between fiction and nonfiction, right? At what points do you feel that Vance is treading the line between telling something that is fully true or is something that is set up fictively within the way that he understands and reads the world? He says on page 9 that he's arranged the story and organized events in terms of how they become organized in his mind. So you get like this great passage on 48, 49, where he's pointing to the personal geographies of Middletown. So, if you were describing Northwest Indiana or anywhere else in Indiana within your journalistic essay, it becomes not necessarily Northwest Indiana in total, but your Northwest Indiana or my Northwest Indiana. In what ways does the line between fiction and nonfiction get blurred in the geographies there? One other thing to note within this is Mamaw Blanton as a literary character and how he describes her, how she becomes alive in your reading of the text. As he introduces her on page 13 as I was the grandson of the toughest woman anyone knew in Jackson, Kentucky. Mamaw had nearly killed a man. And there's that great description of the Christmas incident with Mamaw throwing the perfume bottles onto the floor of the drugstore on pages 33, 34. Be sure you look at that as a great scene in setting up the character there. He also sets her up through her own words. He recollects her words. I love you, she said, but I'm just a crazy bitch, on page 41, where he's trying to get the sense of the tensions that are present within Mamaw, that she's both nurturing and also is very tough. And sometimes doesn't seem to act in his best interest, but somehow she leads him along to the life that he eventually becomes a part of. You can think about the comparison between her and the Blanton men and how he draws her as maybe a more, although there are a lot of tensions in her, she's maybe a more stable influence than the Blanton men, or the way that he compares his grandmother, Mamaw, to his own mother, Bev, and finds Mamaw to be more stable, even with the tensions that are present. And in the end, Vance works towards a sense of change in his own life through Mamaw. As he'll say on page 60, I received a different message at home, and that just might have saved me. And so Mamaw becomes one of those points of stability in his own life that lead him forward in his story. So these are just a few things to note in terms of the work as you wade into Vance's memoir. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.